I got his bio, and I graduated from undergrad at Stevens Point, and then master's at Iowa State University, and he's worked in wildlife conservation, and mostly in Wisconsin. And now he's retired and does the same sort of stuff as a volunteer and part-time worker or contractor, and all sorts of things, and we're very happy to have him with expertise.
Thank you for having me. So yeah, what I'd like to do, and I see a couple of people coming in, so I'm going to delay a little bit here to make sure that everybody gets a chance to get in. But I'd like to just talk a little bit about the biology, ecology of wolves, especially pertaining to Wisconsin.
We got a couple more chairs in the
Talk a
back,
little
and there's a
bit about
couple
the
over
history of
on the other
wolves
side there.
returning to our area, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the current management issues that the state of Wisconsin is working on, a new wolf management plan. The federal government has been back and forth as far as returning management to the state or putting them back on endangered species list, and explain a little bit of that. And leave a little bit of time at the end for some questions. And I think we got to get out of here by 7 o'clock. Is that correct? Or do we have any flexibility on that?
Yeah.
That's not a big issue.
Okay, good.
As long as I'm here.
Okay, good. So, so I'm talking about wolves, and mainly I'm talking about the gray wolf, which is a wolf that occurs in Wisconsin, and it's at one time was one of the most broadly distributed mammals across the world. They lived across almost all of Europe and Asia, and much of North America, kind of from Mexico City northward. The only place they weren't living in the United States was probably in the southeast, where we had a smaller species of wolf called the red wolf. Otherwise, the gray wolf was really broadly distributed. And in our region, we often refer to them as Great Lakes gray wolves. They're a little bit smaller than the western gray wolves or the more northern gray wolves. If you've seen some of the shows and movies and videos on Yellowstone, their males typically are up to 100 pounds or more, and they've got records of, I think, some wolves that are over 100 pounds, over 150, nearly 150 pounds. See, I think we got a chair, a couple chairs up here yet.
Yeah.
You guys want to come up here?
There's one more. Dad's
A couple
coming too.
back in here. So the gray wolf, and these are the typical sizes for gray wolves in our area, 55 to 108 pounds for adult animals. Of 700 some wolves that we captured, the 108 pound is the largest wolf we ever handled. And our trapping was typically done in the spring and summer. They probably weigh actually more in the wintertime, so they could have been 110, 115 pounds. But typically wolves over 100 pounds are rare in our area. And an average adult male is about 80 pounds, and average female is about 70 pounds. And so some of their other characteristics, we call them gray wolves because the overall coloration is kind of a grayish color, but it varies from tans and browns and creams and cinnamons. And they can be nearly black, or we call those melanistic wolves. Although black wolves are relatively rare in the Great Lakes region, probably less than 5% of ours are black. If you go to Yellowstone, about half of their wolves are black and about half of them are gray. And again, those Yellowstone wolves, the adult males there average about 100 pounds, and females about 90 pounds, so quite a bit bigger than our wolves. These are some pictures of some of the gray wolves from Wisconsin. And often we see calendar images of wolves. You see them looking so big and heavy looking because they got their summer coats on, but when you see them in their winter coats on, when you see them in their summer coats, they can look pretty lanky looking, and that tail can be kind of rope-like. It's not always a full bushy tail. The animal we probably most often confuse wolves with are coyotes, which weigh only about a half or third as much. They typically wolf stands about 30, 32 inches at the shoulder, so about to the top of the femur of a 6-foot tall man like myself. The coyote is more at about my knee level, about 15 or about 20 inches in height. So they're quite a bit shorter. They weigh less, typically 25, 30 pounds or so. Average adult male in Wisconsin is probably about 31 pounds. Female is about 26 pounds. And it's always interesting when you can see images of wolves across in the same scenes with other animals. And people sometimes ask me, is this a picture of a wolf? And sometimes in a blurry picture it's hard to tell, but if you can put some other pictures with it that you see at the same site, it can give you a better idea of size. So here we've got a gray wolf walking in front of the same little white pine as this coyote, and you can see there's a little bit of difference in color, but color by itself isn't a good characteristic, but just those long legs and the big feet on it. The head is more blocky in a wolf, and actually the ears on a 80-pound wolf are probably the size of a 30-pound coyote. Proportionally, coyote ears are bigger than wolf ears. They're more pointed and taller. And this is a wolf near my home, about 300 yards east of my house. And so another way you can kind of get a sense for size is just put yourself in the same spot. So again, that wolf is about the height, its shoulder height is about the top of my femurs. Their tracks, they look like a very large dog track. So the right here is a wolf track. They look almost a little bit more rectangular. Dogs are a little bit more roundish in shape. And the claws, the way they're arranged, kind of helps you determine as well. In a dog, those outer toes often kind of splay outward. In a wolf, they typically point almost straight forward. So that's typical characteristics of their tracks. And when they walk, wolves are very narrow-chested. We refer to as keel-chested. Their hind and front feet will line right up with each other. So you can't distinguish the tracks. Whereas dogs tend to be more barrel-chested, so their tracks don't quite line up as well. And a coyote track is just much smaller, about 2.5 inches. A wolf without the claws is 3.5, 4 inches. With the claws, 4 to 5 inches. So wolves are carnivores, and that's sometimes how they develop some reputation, and there's a little bit of controversy sometimes as to how much are they competing with us for some of the things we want to be able to hunt or eat. And the average wolf in our region, some studies have shown about 15 to 19 adult-sized deer. We often round it to about 20 deer per wolf per year. And in Minnesota, some studies have shown they also eat a lot of beaver. So the average wolf eats from 8 to 10 beaver, but that can range from a wolf that's not a good beaver hunter, not killing any, to a really good beaver hunter, maybe killing 28. And I think since this study was done, that they've had some that even over 30 beaver per year per wolf. So some are really good at it, others not quite as good. And when you look at the predation of wolves and how many animals, how many deer they're removed from the deer herd, if you look at northern Wisconsin, our northern Wisconsin wolf areas, we've got about 18,000 bears. They kill on the average about 1.5 deer per bear, mostly fawns. So bears are killing about 27,000 deer. Bobcats, we got about 3,800 in northern Wisconsin. They kill about 6 fawns per bobcat. So they are a pretty important fawn predator as well. So about 2,200, almost 23,000, 22 to 23,000 that bobcat would be killing. Coyotes, we probably have over 12,000. Statewide, we might have 50,000 coyotes across the state. And they kill about 3 fawns per coyote. So just in the Northwoods, they're probably killing 36,000, 40,000 fawns, just the coyotes alone. So we look at about 900 wolves living in the same area. They're killing about 20 deer. They're killing a lot more deer per animal than these other predators, but they live at much lower density, so about 18,000. So you see all these other predators are killing actually more deer than wolves are. Their vehicles kill a couple thousand. Hunters, and this is statistics from 2020, were killing about 54,000 deer in northern Wisconsin. So about 1 out of every 3 hunters are successful in a population of about 376,000 deer. So they kill deer, but they're less than some of the other predators we have on the landscape. And they also eat a variety of other animals. Studies have shown, it's been especially learned about wolves in the coastal regions in the Pacific Northwest, that they can be pretty good fishers, catching fish. But some research in Voyageurs National Park shows that even wolves in our region can be pretty good at catching fish. Turkeys are probably occasionally taken. I've seen stats with turkey hairs in them. I've seen turkey carcasses laying next to a wolf den. And they do a lot of scavenging, so the one underneath the tree there is feeding on a deer that had died from other causes. And they even eat berries. So this is a study in Voyageurs National Park where they found this wolf feeding on blueberries. So their predation it has an effect on the deer herd, on elk herds in other parts of the country. They affect mainly the big game species, the big hoofed animals. And in Yellowstone, it's been determined that prior to wolves being there, the elk herd got very abundant, overly abundant. They were grazing the stream edges right down to the streams, destroying the riparian vegetation. There's no regeneration occurring in the aspen. Pronghorn antelope were not doing very well because the most abundant predator were coyotes, and coyotes are a major predator on pronghorn fawns. When they reintroduced wolves there in 1995, that had an impact on both physically reduced the abundance of elk, but also changed their habits, so they're feeding less in some of these riparian areas. So the streamside vegetation started coming back, beaver started returning, the nesting birds in those bushes were again returning. Pronghorn antelope were doing better because wolves had a suppressing effect on the coyote population. So there was less predation on those pronghorn fawns. They're starting to see more regeneration of the aspen and of cottonwoods occurring because of the presence of wolves. So they have what's known as trophic cascade effects. And we've seen some of those in Wisconsin as well. We've had studies done that shows the middle of a wolf pack area. You get a richer diversity of wildflowers. You get a lot less heavy browsing on the tree saplings in those areas. That there's much less of a presence of coyotes in those areas. So the snowshoe hares do better actually because there's less coyote presence. They probably impact ground nesting birds such as grouse and turkeys because they're reducing some of the predators on those birds. At the edge of wolfpack areas, you see a lot more ferns and grasses that are not as palatable to deer because the wolves are having less of an impact. And there's some research that suggests even things like chronic wasting disease, which is spreading across southern Wisconsin, has become extremely abundant in areas near Madison and west of Madison where a lot of the deer herd is impacted by chronic wasting disease. We've not seen it spread extensively into northern Wisconsin where we've got healthy wolf populations. And there's been some research that suggests wolves could be a factor that reduce the spread of chronic wasting disease because they're very selective of the animals they kill. They typically, out of the deer they chase, kill only 1 out of every 5. So there's something different about the animals they're catching. And any animals having any kind of weakness is more likely to get caught by a wolf than those that are very healthy. So wolves are pack animals, and they're packs, and they are very territorial animals. So that their pack occupies a specific area of ground, of land, that they defend against members of their own species. And they typically defend it in 3 different ways. One is just by scent marking, by their urinations and defecations. They scent mark in specific location that tells other wolves this is an occupied area. Those act as no trespassing signs to other wolves. They also use vocalizations. By howling, other wolves know that an area is occupied. The typical territory in Wisconsin is 50, 60 square miles, but they can hear each other howl from as much as 6 miles away or more, so that's about a 115 square mile area or larger. They can advertise their presence just by doing howling. So, and if the scent marking and vocalization doesn't work, then there's active aggression. So this shows a typical wolf pack. The average pack in mid-late winter Wisconsin is only about 4 wolves. They can range as large as 10 to 12, but we call it a pack if there's a pair that shows breeding activity and is defending a territory. And these are some of the packs in the Clam Lake area, the Cable area where I live. And this is from a dozen years ago, but the packs have really not changed all that much. And what I'm showing on the map here is those packs that are shown in purple were being tracked just by snow track surveys. The ones that are being shown in yellow were radiotelemetry surveys where a wolf was radio collared and was being located on a weekly basis. So you see the straight lines mainly because it's just encompassing all of those radio locations of the wolf. And what you see, there's not a lot of overlap between the territories because those become kind of a no man's land, and neither pack spends a lot of time in those, what we call the interstitial areas. But so they defend those areas and keep other packs from coming into their areas. And again, so they use like scent marking. So you can see the scratch marks there from the wolves and their tracks there. And it's kind of their no trespassing sign that they've got carefully signed with their initials to let other wolves know this is an occupied area. And their scats, they leave those at strategic locations, often in the middle of the road, especially where there's an intersection with some sort of a trail, because it tells other wolves that this is an occupied area. And then there's active aggression. So typically they want to avoid physical confrontation when they can, because there's always a risk of injuring yourself when you're trying to chase somebody out of your territory. So they want to avoid physical confrontation. But in places where wolves are not controlled by people, like in Yellowstone National Park or Isle Royale or Denali, the #1 control on wolves are other wolves. So they kind of control some of their own numbers. So why would a wolf even bother to go into other wolves' territory if there's a risk of being killed by other wolves? Well, a couple of reasons. One is, if you're a lone wolf that's leaving your home territory and you're looking for mating opportunities, you got to check out the neighborhood, which means you got to sometimes check out pack areas. So you take some risk and check pack areas, but there's a risk that if the pack has a full complement of breeding pair, they're not going to let you in there, and there's a chance you could get chased away or even get killed. The other is prey. If the pack next door has more deer than your pack, you might go over there and make a kill and then quickly leave your territory. Or even in the process of making a kill, sometimes it takes them a couple of miles to catch a deer. They could be starting in their own territory. By the time they finish making the kill, the deer may have gone into another territory. They might quickly eat it, what they can, and then get the heck out of there. But they could also run into a confrontation in the pack that lives there. So just kind of going through the annual cycle of wolves. We're at the beginning of the denning period right now, and the winter time from October through March is what we call their nomadic period. They don't have a specific home territory. They don't have a specific home site. They're traveling nomadically throughout their territory. The only sites they have to stay at is when they make a kill, they'll stay there until they finish a kill, then move on to the next location. So they don't have a specific home site during that nomadic period. The pack is fairly cohesive at that time. They mostly stay together. Occasionally they get split up in a hunt, and some of the younger wolves that are reaching sexual maturity may leave their home pack to try to start a pack of their own. So this is an example of wolf tracks that I saw last winter. You can see just the wolves are spending a lot of time traveling together as a group here. And we can see a pack of 7 wolves that went down this road. And it shows also how just snow track surveys can be fairly effective way for counting wolves in the wintertime, because they use these forest roads very extensively for part of their travel ways. So the breeding season is in February. It starts off in late January. Most of the breeding occurs in February. And the female will usually be in estrus for about a week or so. And different females have different estrus cycles. Some will be maybe late January, some might not be until the end of February. But the average is about the middle of February. And then the pups are born 2 months later, usually in an excavated den. So this is a den site up in Douglas County. And they start working on the den in March, but the pups are typically born in about middle of April. And typically the excavated dens like this is a common den sites they use, but occasionally they'll use hollow logs, sometimes natural caves. Sometimes they just make little beds underneath the balsam firs or under a conifer. So it's not always a formal den site. In places like Isle Royale, where the soils are so rocky, it's hard for them to dig. They typically use beaver dams and isolated or abandoned beaver lodges. Here's another wolf den in Douglas County. And the pups are born in the den, and they're pretty helpless for the first few weeks. The mother stays in the den for most of that first 3 weeks, and she's constantly feeding them. She's being fed by the male, and other members of the pack continue to feed her. They bring food back to her, sometimes carrying, sometimes just food in her stomach that they regurgitate for her. When the pups are 3-4 weeks old, they'll start spending short periods of time outside of the den. And after they're about 2 months old, they're big enough that they're weaned. They no longer need the mother's milk. And then the pack moves them to their summer home sites we call rendezvous sites. And these are usually forest openings, sometimes along logging roads, sometimes beaver meadows, sometimes just open forested areas. And they use rendezvous sites from mid-June until the end of August, or end of September into early October. Occasionally they may use them a little bit in the fall, but mostly by the end of September they're done using these rendezvous sites. And then again they get into that nomadic period. But a pack will have 2 or 3 to maybe as many as 9 or 10 different rendezvous sites across the summer. So here's an example of a pack using a well-mowed area as a rendezvous site. There's a couple of others. Here's one using an area along a power line that was seen by one of our pilots from the air. So you got an adult laying down below here, an adult with a pup in the middle, and then 4 pups off to the side there. And this is a case of a rendezvous site right where the whooping cranes are hanging out in Nisita National Wildlife Refuge. And this is pretty unique in that the only place in North America where there's a breeding population of whooping cranes and a breeding population of gray wolves is central Wisconsin and Wood Buffalo National Park in northern Alberta. So Nisita National Wildlife Refuge is a lot easier to visit than Wood Buffalo National Park. And the wolves will use places like, in Wisconsin we do allow bear baiting from the middle of April until the end of the bear hunting season, early part of October. And some of these bear baits do get used by wolves as well. So here we see examples of wolf pups at a bear bait site. And you can see that at the top there, the bear initially knocks the stump over to get to the bait, but then after he leaves, the wolves start coming in, and then they start taking advantage of that site as well. So wolves are born in packs. They spend most of their lives being members of packs, but we do hear about the lone wolves, dispersing wolves. And typically this happens when they're between 1 and 2 years old, sometimes older, sometimes even old adults will leave a pack and decide either to try to set a pack up, establish a pack of their own, or join another pack. And they'll travel on the average 40, 50 miles. But we've got records of wolves traveling as far as Missouri, as far as southern Illinois, throughout Iowa, into Indiana. So the dispersal is a way that wolves avoid inbreeding and join up with other packs. These are some examples of some long-distance dispersal moves of wolves from Wisconsin and Michigan. And this is just the end points from where they started from where they ended. So we don't know the actual travel route. So we've got one from the western UP of Michigan that ends up getting killed in north central Missouri. Was mistaken by a farmer for a coyote. We've got one from over in the Black River Falls area in Jackson County that ends up getting killed in eastern Indiana, only about 12 miles from the Ohio border. The straight line has it going through Lake Michigan, but it probably, we're assuming it probably went around.